Those were some of our top stories, and remember, we will be discussing in detail some of those stories, including the developments with regard to all the raids in the allocation of coal blocks, as well as that exclusive interview with the telecom secretary, all that coming up later on the show. But first, let's discuss the big topic of the day, Bharat spending more than India. I also spoke earlier with Mr. D.K. Joshi, Senior Director and Chief Economist at CRISIL, and someone who's also authored that very interesting report, More Than India. Give us a few more details about some of those interesting findings and revelations in that report.
Well, I think first is that the rural consumption has started growing faster than urban consumption, in the sense that the per capita rural consumption for the last 25 years was lagging behind urban consumption. I think between 2009-10 and 11-12, for the first time, per person rural consumption has outpaced urban consumption. So that's finding number one. I think the second is that the ownership has of many durable goods has increased dramatically in the rural areas. For instance, I think 50% of the stock of televisions, electric fans and some other durables reside in rural areas. The mobile ownership has changed dramatically. One in every two rural household has a mobile phone today. Even in poorer states like Bihar and Odisha, 1/3 of the households own a mobile phone. So I think there has been a clear push to rural consumption that has taken place in the last 2 to 3 years.
But Mr. Joshi, what would you really attribute this to? What are the reasons why we are seeing the rural growth story shining?
Well, I think one clear reason is the rising incomes. The wage rates in rural areas, in the unskilled categories and in many other categories have risen phenomenally. They have outpaced the inflation rate. As a consequence of that, the purchasing power, the affordability of rural India has increased. And I think one of the main reasons behind that is the government focus on the social safety net schemes like NREGA, etc., which raised the threshold of rural wages, also to some extent created labor shortages, and that actually led to a very, very swift increase in wages. And that is the reason why, despite such a high food inflation, people are not protesting, and also they are able to afford other items as well. I think what happens is, as you move up the income ladder, your ability to spend on discretionary items, you are able to exercise choice. I think that increases, and that leads to consumption of durable goods, and that's what we are seeing happening. And I think the other very interesting part of this whole thing is that this is since the rural oriented states are growing faster, states like Bihar, I think that also has contributed to the rural boom to some extent.
You mentioned schemes like NREGA being one of the reasons, but there's been a lot of debate on whether or not NREGA is a good scheme, and if it's led to several distortions in the rural economy. What's really your assessment really of how NREGA has worked? Has it really been successful, and do you think the government needs to tweak it given the circumstances?
See, I think in the current situation, NREGA definitely has given a boost, but I think it's not a sustainable scheme because it leads to fiscal pressures. Eventually, I think you'll have to create more durable job opportunities in rural areas, which means you need to push manufacturing, you need to skill people so that you reap the demographic dividend. I think that is not happening. I think the policy is of giving people fish to eat, not teaching them how to fish. I think that needs to change, and I think for that government will have to focus on skill development and also on creating an environment in which the private sector can come and create job opportunities. I think that hasn't happened so far. So it's a good scheme for the time being, but I think eventually, I think it will, to make it sustainable, you'll have to substitute it by more durable job opportunities.
But going forward, after your analysis and report that you've done, do you think India's growth story will really be the story of India's villages, the story of India's rural areas? That's what's really going to drive our growth forward?
That's going to be a very significant factor, because for two reasons. I mean, one, if you look at the projections of rural and urban population, 60% of the population will still be rural even in 2025. And I think what you'll also see is that a lot of states in India will, which are poorer, will get an opportunity to catch up with the richer states. I mean, this phenomena that we are seeing happening in Bihar, I think though it's a long way to go. So I think what that will do is that will create a demand for goods and services. We talk about demographic dividend for the country as a whole. I think if you look at the demographic dividend within India, that is coming from poorer states. I mean, the working age population is going to rise phenomenally in Bihar, in Madhya Pradesh, in Uttar Pradesh, and that's going to be a large part of the increment in the next decade. So I think this demographic dividend that we talk about India is going to originate from poorer states. So I think that's why it becomes more critical to create job opportunities there, and that's why it also tells you that there is going to be a catch up by these states going ahead.
All right, Mr. Joshi, last question before we wrap up. It's a government that has always got brickbats, at least of late, rather than bouquets for many of its policies, including now the kind of sharp slowdown that we seem to be seeing in the economy. But can this be seen really as the silver lining, and is it also an indication of some sort of inclusiveness coming in our overall growth story?
Well, yeah, it does indicate, because I think if rural consumption, if the consumption of poorer people has risen faster, it does show. But I think if you look at the poverty indicators, etc., I think still there is a long way to go. So I think it's only one bit of positive news, and I think it's the worry is that this model cannot be sustained. I think it needs to be substituted by a more durable, more sustainable model going ahead.
Mr. D.K. Joshi, the author of that interesting report there, giving details. Many thanks, Mr. Joshi, for that. Let me go across to our panelists now and try and understand the analysis further. Harish, to you first. Do you think this is really a trend that is an evident trend, a trend that can be sustained, and also at least some sort of positive news coming? We're tired of all the negative news and all the scams that we've been hearing about. So at least something positive with regard to India's economy.
The first thing which I think one should emphasize is there is no inherent conflict between Bharat and India. You know, if India grows, it's good for Bharat. You know, I think since 2004 to 2010, we were growing by something like, I think, 8.2 to 8.3%, whereas earlier we were growing by, say, about 6%. So this urbanization and industrialization was actually very good for Bharat in two ways. Number one, the more the people you take off the land, it is good for farmers because it enables some kind of consolidation. Otherwise, the land holdings were getting hopelessly fragmented and small. So that opens up some avenues for mechanization. And number two, when there is more urbanization, when there is more industrialization, there is more demand now for labor. You know, so instead of being, so farm labor has alternate avenues of employment. Earlier, that was not there. You know, so there was no opportunity cost for labor. You know, so there was no opportunity cost for labor for working as a say a cane cutter, or as transplanting paddy. So the moment these new avenues for growth came, you know, it led to a tightening of the rural markets, and simultaneously it helped move more people away from the land. So that is one reason why you've had a lot of mechanization, a lot of these things. Like say about 10 years back, nobody ever thought that India could be a market for milking machines. But now you see the way, I think Gujarat government is giving a 50% subsidy on milking machines. Nobody ever thought that there could be a market for cane harvesters. Whereas I think last year, I think New Holland sold some 200 crore worth of cane harvesters. So when you have this 8.4% growth, you know, it produces a certain virtuous cycle. So and we went through one of these cycles, which I think has been it has been underrated. You know, this kind of a transformation has never happened in India. You know, where so much of change has happened in rural area. Maybe during the Green Revolution. During the Green Revolution, it was confined only to, say, Punjab, Haryana, a few states. Whereas this time it has been all across India. You see the wages. The rural wages have increased across the board, even in Orissa, even in Bihar, and they have increased more than the increase in CPI. I think that's what Mr. Joshi was saying. So it has increased in real terms. I think it has been a very virtuous process. So now
significant trend, but let me just take that forward to Rupa and try and understand why is it that it's not getting the kind of attention that it should. We've only been discrediting this government for actually not bringing about inclusive growth. But if we are seeing such an evident trend where the rural wages seem to be going up, where we're seeing consumption increasing in rural areas, clearly it's a trend that deserves greater attention.
Well, I think that is not the correct inference. See, mostly it is the government's populist policies which have resulted in increased thrust on rural areas. But as Dr. D.K. Joshi mentioned, this doesn't give a sustainable growth model for rural areas. If you ask me, well, to begin with, it's a good phenomenon that rural consumption has started growing at a faster pace than urban consumption. But I would have been happier if rural investments would have also picked up. The point is that the rural consumption today has received support because of growth of non-farm sector employment opportunities, also the increased remittances which people who have migrated from rural areas to urban areas who are making to rural areas. So the income levels have increased for variety of reasons. Narega is another thing which also has a negative implication for fiscal balances. So I think, this is not a sustainable model. Well, this is a good beginning, but if it has to sustain, Narega kind of schemes have to be supplemented by good investment opportunities within rural areas.
Shirish, respond to that, because we've seen a lot of negative literature, especially on Narega, huge debate on whether it's worked or not. But at the end of the day, if we're seeing the rural consumption story shining the way it is, and as per the CRISIL report, then a lot of credit needs to go to Narega for it.
Well, I have a little different point of view, and I'm a very strong believer of consumption theme, and we've been meeting a lot of companies. The basic point one has to realize that over 2000 to 2010, there is a drastic improvement in the infrastructure. So the access to the product and the propensity to spend. Now, Mr. Joshi has touched upon saying that there is a lot of money which is available, but at the end of the day, this money was available anyway. The point is that the access to the product has made the possibility of consumption demand. The other point which I would like to drive and have your attention is that if you look at the MSP prices over 2000 to 2005, for example, wheat and rice would have grown at a CAGR of about 4%. However, post 2005 till 2011-12, the MSP prices has grown at 11 to 11.5% CAGR. Now, there is another point of view is that if you look at the pulses, which has had where the MSP has grown more than 14-15%. Now, if that money is available, I mean, yes, there is a story that there is more money which is hands of the consumer, but you also have to give the underlying fact there are about 250 million people who through Narega, the government has tried to uplift them from the poverty line. Now, you can have a separate debate what is the poverty line, but the point is that this working class population who has money and propensity to spend will spend money.
Right. Harish, also let's discuss the change in consumption pattern, because the study also essentially talks about how the consumption pattern has really changed from necessities like toothpastes and toothbrushes that we would talk about earlier as being marketed to those rural areas to now television sets and mobile phones. And that seems to be the real story, the real consumption pattern.
I haven't, frankly speaking, I haven't analyzed rural consumption patterns that clearly. But you'll be surprised. Like, for example, there's a huge market in rural areas for packaged pulses, for example, packaged dal. I think there's a lot of there's a big market for food products itself in rural areas. So like a sugarcane farmer, he needs to buy dal. So I think these kind of products have a lot of promise. It's not that I think it's not that the farmers consume only industrial products and vice versa. That's not the case. So I think there is a lot of scope even within this thing. Like I've seen many farming families, they buy mother dairy milk, or they buy packaged milk. So they buy biscuits, for example. So there are these kind of things happening. So it's not a very simple kind of thing. The other very big thing I think which is happening is education, the demand for education, and I think that is another reason why you are having all these labor shortages. See, like the cane cutter's son. And the cane cutter is not inclined to send to see to it that his son is also doing, is cutting cane. So that is also producing these kind of shortages. So there's a huge demand for education. And I saw these trends happening in a state like Kerala at least about 20 years back. So this entire thing, this disdain for manual labor and these kind of things, I saw this happening in Kerala about 20 years back. And I think now that is being replicated on an all India scale now, in everywhere. So I think, and these things, I think, economy, these cultural aspects are also very important. It's not
right, and as you were saying, even some of the poorer states, as Mr. Joshi was telling us earlier on the day, seem to be reflecting this trend. Mr. Shirish Pardeshi, let me also try and understand if this also means now that you have companies of across various sectors who are now going back to the drawing board, revisiting their strategy, because they're saying, growth seems to be slowing down in the urban areas, but rural areas is where the growth story is. So are we really seeing them going back to the drawing boards and including the rural areas as part of their overall strategy?
Well, your observation is absolutely right, but let me answer this question in a different way. Post 2003, 2004, when India had to go through a massive drought situation where your Kharif and your Rabi crop failed. So post that, these companies have started putting up focus and differentiated offerings in terms of to the rural folks. There are few companies who have taken the early start. There are big examples like Lever and Colgate, and ITC has done rural initiatives through reaching to the rural farmers and giving them through their e-Chopal and the other business segments. Now this help is one way to understand rural consumers and then customize the product how it suits. So for example, you would see that in the toothpaste category there was a whole phenomenon of low price toothpaste. Now people have not invented low price toothpaste, it was existing, it was repositioned at that level. For example, soaps was a big category at that point of time. Then people have done the price segmentation at 5 rupees and 10 rupees. So there were these all strategies which were there. But right now the important factor is that 10 years before everybody was happy with shampoo, but today people are looking for shampoo plus conditioner. So this category is the way it has evolved, and look at what's happened in personal care or skin care. These are the categories which are showing the signs of early revival, and now it is reaching to the higher level of penetration. Now that's the point which I am trying to drive, but still if you look at the category penetration, which is still not achieved the 35-40% mark. So there is a huge potential, there is an access, and I think the advertising and proliferation of media is also going to help to mitigate the rural demand.
Right, Rupa, let's take that point forward, because there's also another interesting Nielsen study, and as Mr. Shishir was telling us, that actually talks about how smaller towns want to shop like metros, and popularity of products like cheese, prickly heat powder and air fresheners. Now that's clearly a result of a lot of advertising, branding and marketing push that we're seeing that is resulting in the awareness of products like these in rural areas. Rupaji, if you could expand and expand on that trend.
Yeah, definitely. You see, conspicuous consumption has grown quite a bit in rural areas. There has been a very strong demonstration effect, and we had the kind of higher income generation we have seen in both urban areas as well as rural areas. Actually, if you see the latest poverty studies also, they have shown that rural poverty has declined at a much faster pace than urban poverty. So this is naturally the consequence of higher income and the influence that media or advertising effort has. But it also has its negative side, because I feel that like some other panelists had mentioned that if you look at the composition of emerging composition of consumption within rural areas, then if demand for education or the other goods which actually improve the skill sets of the people and generate for them the sustainable employment opportunities, then that is something positive. But if they are spending too much on these kind of non-durable goods, then and that also with the support of populist government policies like Narega, then it's definitely not going to be a sustainable model.
Okay, so what is it that's required to ensure that we see this becoming more sustainable? Mr. Damodar, a quick view from you, because clearly everyone seems to believe that this is happening on the back of those job guarantee schemes by the government like NREGA. Like we had Mr. Joshi point out, the kind of fiscal pressures that NREGA and other schemes will put is also unsustainable for the government. So what is it that the government should do to ensure that yes, the Bharat story really becomes India's story, because everyone wants that inclusive growth clearly?
I think this NREGA is vastly overestimated as well as over-demonized. I think this thing has come because there's been a farm sector turnaround. I mean, you look at any crop, look at oil seeds, look at pulses, look at cotton, look at soybean. Nobody ever thought that we'll be producing so much of soybean. I mean, I think soya meal exports itself is about something like 7,000 crore a year. You know, so there has been real production. It is not that there has been no. You look at maize, look at wheat, look at rice. There has been definitely an agricultural turnaround, a production turnaround, and if you combine production turnaround along with higher prices, you know, there's been a proper. I think the terms of trade have improved favorably for farmers during these last 10 years, whether it is UPA or whatever. It would have happened probably even with NDA, but the thing is, this has happened. So there has been real income, and that combined with 8.5% growth in real terms, obviously these would have lifted income. So I don't think, I mean, if at all, NREGA's impact, I think, would have been very marginal. And I mean, and what is it? I mean, 100 days work, and how much is it? Some 70 rupees, 100 rupees. So I think it is vastly exaggerated. I mean, I think we should be a little. I'm quite cynical about these reports. And where is this NREGA been? Mostly it has been in Rajasthan. It has not been there in Bihar. It has not been there in UP. So how do people say that rural wage rates have gone up because of NREGA? I think it is very. It doesn't make sense. So as long as I said earlier, as long as our economy continues to grow, and that will create enough demand for labor. And that will also create demand for, you know, food and these kind of a thing. So that by itself will set off a virtuous process, and that's what has been in the last 10-15 years or something. It has not been because of populism or something. I think that's a very lazy explanation. Very. I mean, I think it's a very shallow explanation. It is much more. I think the growth. I mean, it has been. I think Bharat has been a real story.
Okay, let me quickly get a response from the other two panelists on that point that you've raised, because you're clearly saying that NREGA cannot be credited with having given the kind of consumption story. Rupaji, a quick word from you before I go to Mr. Shishir as well.
See, I to some extent I agree that we cannot attribute everything to NREGA alone. But what about the MSP? I mean, if you look at the last 2-3 years, the weighted average increase in minimum support prices has been in the range of, you say, 16% to 20%. That is huge. And this has been, you know, the support for this is coming from the fiscal exchequer. And today we all know the state of India's fiscal exchequer. So from that perspective, I'm saying that how long, you know, this kind of support will kind of sustain the rural consumption growth.
How have milk prices touched? I don't
sure,
think
go
so.
ahead.
The major point is that the investment absorption capacities of rural areas has to go up. The thrust of the government policies has been primarily on giving incomes or you know, asking banks to lend more, but that doesn't necessarily result into growth of productive assets. What we are saying is that there is no denial of the fact that there has been a shift to an upper trajectory, but for its sustainability, what we require is the improved investment capabilities within rural areas. Today the fact is that agriculture share is shrinking and rural incomes are growing primarily because of the growth in non-farm employment opportunities. And that is at a time when food price inflation is really acting as a major macro risk for India.
Mr. Shirish, a word from you on NREGA and its impact, while we've got Mr. Harish Damodaran clearly saying that we are overestimating the impact of NREGA. There are many who believe that it's created, it's led to such employment at an unprecedented scale that's one of the clear one big reason why we are seeing the rural consumption story growing at the rate at which it is. And of course, the trend that is pointed out in that report also talks about rural consumption outpacing urban consumption after 2 decades. So obviously, there has to be a clear reason for that. A quick response from you, sir.
Well, I completely, I partially agree Mr. Damodaran's view. The point is that look at what government has put. It's 162,000 crore which is flushed in to the NREGA scheme. You also have to admire the fact that the 2005, if you look at the minimum wage was in the NREGA, it was about 40-50 rupees. Now, if you look at the wage inflation, currently the average per day, the rural folk gets about 121 rupees. So you also have to see that fact that the inflationary benefit is been given to the rural folks. I'll also give you the additional point through our research and through our contacts. What we have found out in the family, when there is a dual income, there is a farm income which is coming in, and the younger generation, the younger population in the rural areas would try and intend to do non-farming work. It could be transportation, or it could be education services, it could be anything. I agree the point what is mentioned is that you cannot completely attribute to the MSP, you cannot completely attribute to the NREGA. It's a mix and match of many other things. The point which I am saying is there is a dual income which is happening, and if there is a dual income, there is a larger proportion of the spends which is spent on the consumption theme. It could be packaged milk, or it could be a packaged food, or it could be a packaged personal care services.
Okay, Mr. Harish Damodaran, are we going to see this prosperity in rural India becoming a more sustainable trend? Is it really here to stay? What, according to you, will be the trend going forward?
I think if the economy slows down, the virtuous cycle which we saw in the last decade will be turned into a vicious cycle. Because it's very simple, because you won't be able to take more people off the land, and that is very important according to me. You have to create these alternate employment avenues. It is very good if rural India grows not because of agriculture, because of non-agriculture. So because that will enable real specialization, so that the people who are interested in farming, they farm. And typically, if there are, say, 3 brothers in a rural family, 2 of them will work in the cities, or one will be in the army, one will be this thing, and one of them then does the farming. So I think everything depends on how the economy grows in the next 10 years. Now, if this particular recession is going to continue, if it is going to continue for about, say, 5 years, then I think things will be quite disastrous. I think probably you'll see farm prices coming down. There was this phase from, I think, 1998 to around 2003. I remember it was so difficult. I mean, farmers had a real tough time. The prices were just not increasing. I remember Ajit Singh used to take credit for increasing the MSP by 10 rupees. So whereas I think the last 10 years, in that way, it has been, I think it has been fabulous for the farmers, and inflation has not been, it has definitely not hurt the poor in that sense, because they are able to pass on the costs, which is the reason why plumbers and electricians and all are not available that easily. So any day I prefer growth to concerns about inflation and all these things about government spending. We shouldn't be moralistic about all these kind of things. As long as there is growth, it is good. It's good for the economy. It's good for everybody. It's good especially for the poor. And the moment you slow down and you go into all the excess monetarist curbs and these kind of things, then everything, the fun is gone. Then you're back to whatever 1998 to 2003.
Okay, Rupaji, a quick word from you on one of those points that Mr. Damodaran has raised there with regard to inflation and its impact on farmers, really, because we've seen a recent controversy with the Union Steel Minister actually saying, inflation is actually good for farmers. And this is obviously ties in with the larger trend of the kind of rural prosperity that we're seeing. So inflation and its impact on farmers.
No, I personally feel farmers are not just, farming community doesn't represent only producers, they are also consumers, and inflation hurts all consumers. And if you look at the, the income distribution within rural areas or agriculture, it is very skewed. I mean, some 60-70% of the output is contributed by 4 to 5% of agrarian community. So we have to think in terms of landless laborers and marginal farmers who's, who are really badly hurt by very high inflation. I'm fully on the side of growth, but I also believe that if you have chronic inflation, then it hurts long-term or medium-term growth prospects. So one has to think of control of inflation from that perspective.
Mr. Shirish, your view on inflation and its impact on farmers. The fact that they are getting a higher higher money for their produce.
Well, I have a little different aspect to say about it. Inflation 5 to 7%, which is RBI's comfort zone, is good for everybody, for urban, rural, everyone. The point is the inflationary cost pressure, whether is really helping the farmers. Because today, if you look at a potato which is grown in, say, in rural Andhra Pradesh or say MP or UP, which is 2 rupees a kg. Ultimately, it is from the farm to plate, it is sold as 12 or 15. The point is that the government or the policy or the regulator should create a transparency to get the legitimate price to the farmers. If that is done, I think half of the task is done better. The other point is also is that we might be, I mean, we are the world's largest food grain growers in terms of pulses, if you see. But there is a lot of farm wastage which happens. If we have been able to correct creating a supply chain initiatives and create a green revolution in terms of supply chain initiatives, I think we will be able to manage the prices. Now, inflation is the mix of these all aggregate things what we are doing here in the farm. Now, if we cut down this initiative, if we take the initiative and cut down this farm wastages, I think we will be able to control the inflation. The point what I'm trying to drive is that this inflation is helping, but if we cut down the inflation, there will be a lot of productivity and there will be a lot of quality which we will be able to deal, and then consumer is ready to pay for the quality and that price.
All right, a quick word also from Mr. Damodaran on the construction boom, because we seem to have ignored that trend entirely, and that is obviously another very evident trend. And looking at the kind of construction growth that we've seen, if we look at the recent GDP numbers, that's again perhaps one of the reasons why we are seeing this kind of rural prosperity. Would you agree, Mr. Damodaran?
I don't know, because I was quite perplexed to see that figure. You're referring to the CSO data, right? Showing whatever 11% growth in construction, right?
That's right. That's right. And that perhaps
no, I don't know. I don't know whether that has anything.
But the fact that there are obviously more jobs that are being created in the construction sector, and all of those jobs going to the rural areas, people migrating, do you think that is an obvious link? I can see Rupaji nodding in agreement, but Mr. Damodaran, a word from you quickly first.
Well, obviously construction has been one of the major sources of pulling away people from the rural areas. Definitely that has been one reason why the rural labor market has tightened so much. And yes, definitely, I mean, construction is a good sector. Industry general is a good sector. Manufacturing particularly is a very good sector. So which is what I'm saying. So I don't see any conflict between India and Bharat. If India shines, Bharat will shine, definitely. And if Bharat shines, that's good for India. I mean, if there's more money with farmers and with rural laborers, it's good for all of us. I mean, I think it's very good for Hindustan Lever. It's very good for ITC. It's very good for all the tractor companies. You look at it. I mean, today I think about 5 lakh tractors are being sold every year, whereas I remember it used to be hardly 1.5-2 lakh tractors. You look at herbicides. This was a sector. If you look at, for example, within plant protection chemicals, the fastest growing segment is not insecticides, it's herbicides. And why herbicides? Herbicides because there is a shortage of labor for weeding. So it shows what are the new things which are happening. So milking machines. I mean, milking machines, tractors. combine harvesters. These are all markets. So if there is more money in rural India, it is good. And to that extent, what Beni Prasad Verma has said is correct. I mean, it need not be a very bad thing. And this correction was waiting to happen. It had to happen. It had to happen, because if all our salaries have gone up like this, I remember when I joined the profession, what I was getting then and what I'm getting now. So I think a farmer or a rural wage laborer, he's entitled to the same thing, and it has to be. I mean, there has to be a correction, and that's what happened, and which we are not somehow willing to accept. We still think that the fellow in the rural areas, he should get only whatever 100 rupees a day. That's not possible. I mean, it's a dream world.
But it is definitely a very heartening trend to see those rural wages going up, and if what you're saying is actually correct and it is a sustainable trend, it obviously bodes very well for the Indian economy. Rupaji, closing comments from you really on this trend and the reasons and how sustainable it is.
Well, I'm also happy about the fact that rural wages have been increasing, and I wish that they should keep on increasing at the same pace, provided the actual stimulus to consumption comes from increased investment, increased employment opportunities, and increased production capabilities within rural areas. I'm a bit worried about severe shrinking of the agriculture sector when India is facing this kind of a food shortage problem. So I think the solution has to come from both the supply side management as well as the demand management, which Reserve Bank of is doing, and I'm quite supportive of it.
Mr. Shirish, a last word from you really on agriculture and its contribution to the economy overall. What's going to be the trend going forward?
Well, I have two closing points. The first point is that if you look at the rural, if you look at the agri output in 2001, Kharif used to contribute about 52 to 53%, and the balance was Rabi. If you look at last 2 to 3 years, it's the other way. Your Kharif is about 46, 47, and your Rabi is about 53. And whatever numbers, whatever analysis, whatever reports which are available, you would see that the Rabi crop has a better price premium over Kharif. That's the first point. So that money is there. Now there is a debate, who's larger, whether India is larger or whether your Bharat is larger. I think the point is that more than half of the states which are there in India, about 12 states, which are growing in terms of about 12% odd in terms of GDP. Look at what has happened in the northeast belt. Look at Mizoram, look at Kohima. These are the states are growing about 14-15% in terms of GDP. What has happened in Bihar? Look at the change in the government initiatives and all. The GDP is growing about 12-13%. The point what I'm trying to drive is that there is a money which is there in Bharat, and the Bharat will shine in terms of infrastructure growth. And if infrastructure growth is there and the government is trying to implement NREGA initiatives, the MSP would continue about 9 to 10% going forward. But if the government takes a cost measure in terms of bringing up the technology advancement, may it be in terms of transparency, in terms of farm produce, or in terms of price what is actually given to the farmers, and if takes the initiative in terms of supply chain initiative, I think we'll be able to contain the cost inflation, and I think this story should continue for a longer time.
All right, we really do hope that this story does continue for a longer time. With that, it's a wrap here on this special discussion. Thank you all for joining us. It is a very, very heartening trend, and we really certainly hope it's a trend that can drive India's growth going forward. Many thanks all of you for joining us and sharing your views. We're going to slip into a quick break, but on the other side, we'll bring you up to speed with all the important developments that have been going on through the day, including some of those raids on the companies with regard to allocation of coal blocks. That's coming up after a break.